Listen up.
Crowds of protesters back on the streets again tonight from Atlanta to Washington, D.C. as statues around the country are under attack once more. And the president talks tough, promising jail time for monument vandals. We're going to take you live back out onto the streets of Washington in just minutes. And after months of pandemic isolation, followed by weeks of tense protests and violence, some folks are letting off some steam by lighting up the night sky. Sudden wave of fireworks exploding in cities across the country, and it's not going over well. And in Minneapolis, frustrated police speaking out about the night they were forced to abandon the 3rd Precinct headquarters there and the nights of rioting and looting that followed. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Breen. We begin tonight on the streets of Washington, where White House correspondent Kevin Quirk is back in the thick of it tonight. What is the scene tonight? Good evening, Kevin.
Evening, Shannon. As you can imagine, things are a little bit more calm than they were about 24 hours ago in this spot. In fact, about a block away from here over at Lafayette Park, that's where we saw an incredible scene. The video, you've all seen it over and over, frankly, over the last 24 hours. Protesters attempting to take down the statue of Andrew Jackson. That, of course, did not happen. Law enforcement moved in to secure the statue. Not before it was defaced, however, but today it was clear the president was frustrated and he's had enough.
We are looking at long-term jail sentences for these vandals and these hoodlums and these anarchists and agitators, and call them whatever you want. Some people don't like that language, but that's what they are. They're bad people. They don't love our country, and they're not taking down our monuments. I just want to make that clear.
So the president sort of clarified his thinking on Twitter. He said, I have authorized the federal government to arrest anyone who vandalizes or destroys any monument, statue, or other such federal property in the U.S. with up to 10 years in prison for the Veterans Memorial Preservation Act or such other laws that may be pertinent. The president, meanwhile, did travel to the Grand Canyon state of Arizona today, speaking to thousands at an organized event by Turning Point Action. That trip coming as he continues to tout the ever-expanding border wall system, which he says is doing a phenomenal job of securing our southern border. But that trip does come amid a bit of controversy, as coronavirus hospitalizations in Arizona have now hit a record number. Arizona, in fact, reported a record high of 3,591 new cases, with nearly 60,000 known cases in the state overall. But as the president has noted repeatedly, the rate of testing is also way up, and the mortality rate, thankfully, is way down. So for context, do keep that in mind. Meanwhile, back out live here in the nation's capital, we are in the Black Lives Matter Plaza. As you see, a relatively small contingent of protesters here. Law enforcement have been here. We've been here since 3 o'clock, and they have been standing here swapping out different shifts, but they have been here and joined by protesters pretty much the entire time. Shannon?
All right, Kevin, keep us updated. Thank you very much. New Yorkers fired up over fireworks, trying to force the mayor to crack down on this by blaring their car horns outside his mansion late last night. Mayor Bill de Blasio now forming a task force to crack down on the, quote, public nuisance of the fireworks. Well, senior correspondent Rick Leventhal has the latest on that, plus the ongoing unrest across the country tonight. Hey, Rick.
Shannon, this is one of those stories that kind of comes out of left field after months of coronavirus issues and weeks of protests and nights of looting. Now we learn that fireworks complaints have skyrocketed across New York City, with people setting them off across the 5 boroughs pretty much every single night. Whether it's boredom or a form of protest or rebellion, local leaders say it's out of control. In the first 6 months of last year, the city got about 1,000 fireworks complaints. This year, more than 12,500 in June alone. It's illegal to buy, sell, or ignite them in New York, and now the mayor says police and firefighters will crack down, focusing on suppliers with undercover operations targeting the sources. And interestingly, today, as you mentioned, the day that this crackdown was announced, it followed a noisy protest outside the mayor's house last night, with drivers laying on their horns to call attention to the problem.
We're going to start a huge sting operation to go and get these illegal fireworks at the base, meaning everywhere they're being sold around New York City, and even where they're being sold in surrounding states that we know are flowing into New York City.
Well, fireworks are the last thing on the minds of officials in Seattle, who announced that they would be dismantling that Capitol Hill organized protest zone after 3 shootings over the weekend left 1 dead and another critically injured. But instead of vacating, the protesters have been moving concrete barricades and fencing, practicing human chains and other forms of resistance, and refusing to clear out of the 6-block area unless numerous demands are met, including reducing the Seattle police budget by 50%.
The mayor ceded that zone to these anarchists and vandals and rioters, ignoring the rights of the 30,000 good citizens who live there and pay taxes. Now, she and the police have lost all their leverage.
The unrest could affect Seattle's future. The CEO of a billion-dollar investment firm says that he's moving his firm to Phoenix just in time, although the company, Shannon, says that the move was in the works for months.
All right, Rick Leventhal in New York, thank you. Breaking tonight in Atlanta. Here's the scene where our Steve Harrigan has been reporting. This is at the Wendy's where Rayshard Brooks was shot and killed. Well, our Steve Harrigan talked to a couple of people there who say there are armed citizens on site, and they explain why.
There is no police presence here. There's no one else to protect us. So me and my fellow brothers are here to protect each other.
And he didn't say police would be welcome when Steve asked him about if they did show up there. No, we're going to continue to monitor the situation in Atlanta. Meanwhile, in Minneapolis, the president of the police union there speaking out for the first time since the protests erupted. Officers are blaming a failure in leadership for all that widespread rioting and looting and destruction and the violence that's been on the rise there. Mike Tobin has the story.
Police officers say the retreat from Minneapolis 3rd Precinct was planned in advance.
I came in for my board meeting at noon, and I was informed by my board prior to our meeting that I was asked if I emptied my locker, and I said no. And they said, well, you need to go empty your locker. They're giving up the precinct.
4 officers unable to clean out their lockers were those charged in connection with the death of George Floyd. Their gear was some of the body armor, radios, and even weapons that went out the door. When Brandon Wolf, an alleged looter and arsonist, was arrested, police say he was wearing the body armor of Officer Tu Tao.
Our understanding was it was going to be a symbolic victory for the rioters, that we would give them something because it was the 3rd Precinct that the officers worked out of that were involved. And then that would quell the disturbance and they would stop rioting and take it as a victory and go away.
It didn't work. The next day, State Patrol troopers and the National Guard established a perimeter and a curfew. The line fell apart. No curfew was enforced, and Minneapolis burned.
The biggest failure that I observed would have been the communication, not just between our front office, our admin, down to the officers on the ground, but across, to the State Patrol, with the National Guard.
The Police Officers Federation claims a total failure of leadership, absence of direction, and a lack of equipment because city leaders feared a police force that looked militarized.
They felt vulnerable and they felt abandoned. Cops want to know what in the hell happened. Why weren't we given directives to do anything? Why couldn't we defend ourselves?
Now, with the Minneapolis City Council looking to disband the department entirely, police say the morale of the rank and file is at an all-time low, and gun violence has spiked in Minneapolis, with more than 100 people shot since George Floyd was killed.
They don't need to get rid of us. They need to get more of us, because there's nobody out here equipped to handle what's happening in our city better than the police officers in our city.
The police union rebuffs claims of racism or that they protect bad cops. Like all of us, leaders in the union say they were horrified at the video of George Floyd being killed. Still, the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association is obligated to provide a legal defense to all police officers, including those accused in this case, and they intend to honor that obligation. Shannon, back to you.
Mike Tobin in Minneapolis, thank you. So defacing and destroying statues and monuments to American history continuing across the country tonight, as New York's governor says taking down statues can be a healthy expression of anger. Let's discuss. The Fox News contributor DeRoy Murdoch and conservative journalist and author Andy Ngo. Good to have you both back, gentlemen.
Good to see you.
All right, let me play this soundbite from Governor Cuomo talking about these statues coming down, then we'll get your response.
I think it's a healthy expression of people saying, let's get some priorities here and let's remember the sin and mistake that this nation made and let's not celebrate it.
Droy, your reaction?
That's just total madness. You know, I don't think we advance as a culture by yanking things off pedestals and cheering as they crash the ground and break into pieces. Much better and more sensible thing to do is put plaques around. I call it bronze plaques matter. Put plaques around these controversial statues. Talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the people who are depicted in bronze or in marble or granite, whatever it might be. And another idea, very simple. Let's put up more statues. Why don't we, rather than yank down statues, why don't we put up statues of people like Frederick Douglass, Harry Tubman, Booker T. Washington, Duke Ellington, Jackie Robinson, MLK, Rosa Parks, people like this, and we'll have people we can admire and look up to these people and say, wow, what a wonderful example of humanity they are, rather than tearing down statues and destroying. Let's actually be creative and produce something.
All right, I want to play a little something the president had to say tonight, speaking in Phoenix about this whole thing.
You give power to people that demolish monuments and attack churches and seize city streets and set fire to buildings, then nothing is sacred and no one is safe.
So he said to allow this, nothing is sacred and no one is safe. In the writing in the Federalist, they add to this. They say, everywhere statues are torn down by the mob, history promises people are next, saying without a committed and targeted crackdown on this disorder and its leaders, the committed and targeted killings of their opponents and critics will come next. The increasingly violent mobs in our streets are chanting for it. I think we've lost Andy, so let me stick with you, DeRoy. Is that overstating where we're headed if this is allowed to continue?
You know, who knows where this is going? 3 weeks ago, we all agreed that the video of George Floyd was appalling and we should have a serious discussion about police brutality, excessive force, and so on. And 3 weeks later, here we are with people threatening to bring down the statue of commemorating Abraham Lincoln's emancipation of the slaves, for God's sake. I just heard earlier that when that statue was dedicated, the guest of honor was none other than Frederick Douglass, the great black abolitionist. And there are people now saying, let's yank that down. You had the statue of Stevie Ray Vaughan, who's a blues guitarist, never bothered anybody. They attacked that. And Sean King, who's one of the founders of, one of the early activists of Black Lives Matter, he had this amazing statement. He said that, that we needed to bring down the statues of the white European they claim as Jesus should also come down. They're a form of white supremacy. All murals and stained glass windows of white Jesus and his European mother and their white friends should also come down. So now I guess statues of Jesus are next with the bullseyes on them. And I guess once you start pulling down statues of Jesus, then maybe you start going after human beings. This is a mad, completely out of control mob. They're not talking about any serious agenda items or proposals or policy changes. It's about total destruction and mayhem, and I fear it might be eventually carnage and bloodshed. These things can break down.
The president has talked about the fact that there is a federal
carnage and bloodshed. This starts at the top with our leaders. This began in 1988 with Ronald Reagan's association, his administration, because things was not handled promptly and professionally. Now we're dealing with what we're dealing with in today's society. Once more, the person that's speaking right now predicted, give or take, long about February or March, long about the time the pandemic was hitting America, that there was going to be massive looting and rioting in the streets, and that it would require National Guard to be able to restrain these type of activities. And now the very thing that I predicted is in fact coming true. It is absolutely sickening. It is mind-boggling. It is horrifying to sit and watch this stuff on TV unfold, because it is not resorting to a true answer. It is not resorting to establishing anything by bringing chaos and anarchy. If anything, it's adding insult to misery towards bringing that much more of a problem into a problem that already was existing in regards to the coronavirus. Look, nobody asked for the coronavirus. Nobody purposely sat down and planned this out and said, you know what, we're going to have a disease that's going to hit America that's going to upset the apple cart. But it has. As unfairly as it sounds and as unrealistically as it sounds, it has occurred here, not only in America, but throughout the whole world. So is everybody going to go mad? Is everybody going to take out their aggression out on different people and different things? Because I guarantee you, whenever it does, God will put an end to it. He put an end to it in the era of Noah. He put an end to it in the era of Sodom and Gomorrah. And he'll put an end to it pertaining to this type of nonsense that's going on. Talk about being caught in between a hard place and a rock. David and I was begging for the Weakley County authorities to do something about the problems out here. And people was sniggering and laughing and being entertained by it. I hope now Tommy Thomas and Judge Tommy Moore and Judge Pence and all these other little towns around here, I hope now that they're still laughing and sniggering over all of this. Because now it is coming near a neighborhood near you. And if it's not coming in one form, it's coming in another. Gasoline is now over $2 a gallon. Hamburger meat is $10 a pound. I mean, there's chaos in the streets. My God. It's anarchy. There has to be some sort of reasonable compromise so that people can get back to their regular routine and go back to their regular way of life without all this chaos and bloodshed. Because that's just like this guy just got through saying. Carnage and bloodshed. We're looking at the same type of deal that occurred back during the Civil Rights Movement, back in the 60s and the 70s. Back whenever it was predominant of seeing hangman's nooses hanging in different places because of the whites being against the blacks and the blacks being against the whites. This is a horrible, horrible, sad time for not only the American history, but the world to be going through right now. It's horrifying to watch this and to watch these occurrences unleash themselves on a day-to-day, night-to-night basis. People need to wake up. They need to get their hearts and their lives right. And they need to put their thinking caps on. And we need to go back to work towards becoming a productive society for the good, for the betterment of the good, for the good of humanity. That's what people need to do. And we can work out all these other imperfections as we go. But to cause mayhem, chaos, anarchy, burning buildings, hurting people, like they said a while ago, there's been over 100 shootings in Minnesota since the death of George Floyd. Is that acceptable? No, that is not acceptable.
There is a federal law against defacing property and federal memorials and monuments, that kind of thing. He says it can be up to 10 years in prison for those who are caught and prosecuted and convicted of this. Andy, you've been on the scene of a number of these protests. Do you think that's enough of a deterrent to stop folks?
Yes, there should be severe prosecutions for those who are destroying public property. Look, I think there is a legal process for how
public or private property,
how citizens want to change monuments or statues, the way to not do it is to go out in the mob and to destroy property. Unfortunately, the precedent has been set in Democrat-run cities that if you use violence, we will give you what you want. If we're only going to get more of it.
Well, we'll see. And if there are prosecutions, a lot of these folks are on tape and on camera, and so we'll see if that goes anywhere. DeRoy and Andy, thank you both for weighing in tonight. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
All right, as the European Union prepares to reopen its borders July 1st, there is a travel ban being considered for citizens from one country. Might surprise you. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt showed us tonight. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Shannon. Yeah, Americans could be banned from traveling to Europe as international alarm grows over the number of infections in the U.S., with California, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, and Florida among the 22 states grappling with a significant surge. But President Trump insisted today he wasn't joking when he said at the weekend he asked officials to slow down coronavirus testing.
I don't kid. Let me just tell you, let me make it clear. We have got the greatest testing program anywhere in the world. We test better than anybody in the world. Our tests are the best in the world, and we have the most of them. By having more tests, we find more cases.
Dr. Anthony Fauci told lawmakers today the country needs even more testing.
Not only testing to specifically identify people in the identify, isolate, and contact trace, but also much more surveillance if you want to get your arms around and understand exactly what's going on in community spread. So it's the opposite. We're going to be doing more testing, not less.
But whatever the state of testing, if the numbers remain high, there appears to be a very real chance, Shannon, that Americans will be unwelcome travelers this summer in large parts of the globe. Shannon?
All right, Jonathan Hunt in LA, thank you so much. Well, police officers feeling demoralized as departments worry about the ability to bring in new recruits. And we look at what happens when police are not out on the streets. That's next.
This is all demoralizing. It's demoralizing that a society in the 21st century is going back to primitive, barbaric ways in doing what they're doing.
Where we go from here, there seems to be no real effort at bipartisan police reform on Capitol Hill. There are competing packages that don't seem to have enough votes to come together across the aisle, so we wait on that. In the meantime, this is what Senator Cory Booker had to say about what the GOP is offering up in its package.
Is it guarantees that the cycle of violence in our country, the cycle of the abuse of civil rights, the cycle of death that has so moved so many Americans will continue.
He says that conservatives and Republicans are not serious about police reform. What do you say, Heather?
I say Cory Booker and his fellow Democrats are not serious about black lives. This is what amazes the cops. This is why they're demoralized. The question is, where is the outrage? This weekend in Chicago, there were 106 people shot, 14 of them fatally. One of those lethal victims was a 3-year-old boy who was driving in a car with his gangbanger father, who was the object of the drive-by shooting. This is nothing new in Chicago. In 2016, on Father's Day, there was another 3-year-old boy who shot, who's now paralyzed for life. 24 children under the age of 12 shot in 2016, none of them by cops. This year in Chicago, 300 people have been killed. The cops have killed 3 people, all armed and dangerous. That's less than 1% of all shootings. The Black Lives Matter activists have been silent about this carnage. And the cops are going to have a hard time solving these crimes because in many cases, the victims won't cooperate, the witnesses won't cooperate, the people who are out there working their hearts to try and get justice for these black victims are the cops. And instead, we're back to talking about coronavirus masks and a phantom wave of police brutality. That is simply not the case, Shannon. The problem in the black community is not the police, it's criminals. And if the police back off, as they're going to do under this false narrative about racism, if the police are being told in a constant stream of invective by the elite establishment that they are racist for being proactive in black communities, policing is political, and it is both understandable and arguably appropriate that they back off if they're told that they're racist for using their powers of observation. And when they back off, we are going to lose more black lives, and more bloodshed is going to happen.
Let me get you to comment quickly on a piece in the Washington Post who says that, those who say you shouldn't be criticizing the police have got it wrong. Says, it's so ironic to see the actual police and their supporters turn into the PC police. They want criticism of police or their funding to become taboo, and they've long sought to quash conversations about racist and violent policing. A quick final word from you on that.
That's ridiculous. The police just want equal time. They would just like some observation of why they're in inner city communities, which is crime. The idea that there's no criticism of the police in our public sphere, this guy is nuts. I don't know where he's been, because that is the only message that comes out of the media, out of the mainstream political establishment. It has to be rebutted, Shannon, because the result, if you care about black lives, is going to be more carnage in the inner city. The police are there overwhelmingly to help the good people in the community. That's why they go into policing. They continue to believe in the good people in the community, even as when they get out of their cars to make an arrest, as is happening in Chicago, they're shot at, their bottles are hurled at them, they're cursed at. This narrative is creating hatred. It's going to create more resistance to arrest. It's going to increase the use of officer force as well to try and quell people that are resisting. We're in a vicious cycle, and if we don't come out of it, Shannon, we are going to see civil peace become a distant memory.
Mm-hmm. And we have to always emphasize that the vast majority of people who sign up for law enforcement, as you said, they're not doing it for the money or for the glory. It's very hard work, and they are very good people, bad apples in all professions, including mine and yours. Heather, thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, John Bolton speaking out tonight to our own Brett Baird. He's got something to say to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and guess what? She joins us live next to respond to the interview, along with our own Juan Williams.
We're going to leave it there tonight with what's going on out here, what's going on in America. It's so disrupting in productivity. It's so against that in which what the Bible teaches towards peace and utopia and prosperity. It's the devil's work that's at hand right now. It says in the Bible something about the idle hands is a devil's workshop. Now, since this pandemic is hit and all these people has become unemployed, they don't have nothing else to do other than to stand out in the roads at night and scream and holler and yell and whine and complain. It's just gotten ridiculous out of hand. And to think that they're up there shooting those fireworks up there in New York with so many people up there, knowing that it's against the law, is just once more adding insult to injury. If there's ever been a time that we needed to stick together as a Christian society, it's today. But yet now, there's no one knocking on my door or calling the Windmill Ministries. So whatever has befallen upon to America in regards to this great remorse, they have brought it upon to themselves, distant, far and wide, beginning right here at ground zero, towards what has occurred in the eyes of injustice and injustice for this ministry. Let the record stand that they have brought this upon themselves. That the Windmill Ministries tried to help going all the way back in the 1989 or 80 and 8 during Ronald Reagan's administration that I got proof of. Let the record stand that they have brought this upon themselves. Good luck to all of us, and once more, as we end our program every evening or every night, shalom.